Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast, Road to Arrowverse Crisis, Episode 6. Today we are covering the amazing special crossover, Invasion. As always, we're going to go through all of the seasons of the Arrowverse show, building up to the gigantic crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths. And join with me, as always, are my friends Tessa and Sam. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, let's go ahead and just dive straight into Invasion, because this crossover was really fun, right?
Yes, definitely way more fun than the last one was.
What did you think about Invasion, Sam?
Well, it's no alternate universe with Nazis, but it's pretty good.
All right, so just so the listeners are aware, if you haven't even watched this for some reason, or you're just doing this for the reminder of all the beautiful things that happen in the Arrowverse, Invasion starts when a spaceship crashes on Earth, and Barry Allen is there to witness it, and what he witnesses are a bunch of basically just humanoid aliens running out of the spaceship, right?
Yeah, I mean, humanoid. I don't know. They're pretty scary looking. The Dominators are. They have it's the teeth. I think it's the lack of lips and the teeth that make them kind of creepy.
The animation budget didn't let them move their lips.
Well, I mean, sometimes lack of budget leads to some pretty inventive villains. I mean, look at Doctor Who and the Daleks and the Cybermen. They were definitely not born of having a lot of money on their side. The Daleks definitely look like somebody went through the trash and went, "Oh, okay, this is our villain of the week." So
get a little plunger and
long tradition, villains being sci-fi villains being the result of the mother of invention being the mother of necessity, not a great budget.
Yeah, this starts out, we didn't really talk too much about it during last week's episode when we covered Arrow and Flash from this season, but Barry sees the Dominators, is what they'll be known as, crashing down, and just a ton of them running out of the ship like chickens with their head cut off.
Yeah, they just sort of rush by him. It's kind of an odd scene. Well, especially because you kind of expect they're just going to start going on this rampage or something, but then they don't. They just run away.
Well, it's supposed to make maximum impact, kind of, but it's kind of, when you think about it later, the fact that they were there for metahumans like Barry, maybe, doesn't make a whole lot of sense that they just run right by him.
Right, and that Barry says in the next scene with Lila that pretty much he knows that they can't beat them alone after just seeing this.
Yeah, just seeing this group of aliens, he's like it's time for a crossover.
Well, and it's and looking back back at it in retrospect, Lila may be very inclined to agree with him. No, assemble all of your friends, because, as it turns out, I'm not who I say I am, which is something we just found out as a real-time early October spoiler for Crisis.
Yeah, so there might be some retroactive reading of Lila Michaels as a sort of different character based on some things we have discovered about Crisis. So it is really interesting that she's just kind of yeah, get your team together.
Huh. I actually do not know what you're talking about, so...
Are we saying anything that we know about
things
Crisis?
That are coming out in real time?
I didn't... what, did Arrow already air?
No. This is just something we know, this is just something we know based on some news. They have confirmed that Lila Michaels will be in Crisis, but that she will play a role that she has in the comics, I guess,
and
what's
it called?
Harbinger is her name in the
comics.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, and so, but they haven't confirmed if it's this Lila Michaels or if it's another Earth's Lila Michaels. So a lot of people think that it could just be another Earth's Lila, but it would be interesting if really this whole time Lila Michaels has been engineering the crisis. Like, the whole time she's actually working behind the scenes trying to get all these people together. I mean, it does make sort of the rewatching of these crossovers fun to kind of see what she's doing.
Well, and as we talked about last time, this season across the various shows, mostly Flash and Arrow, but definitely here, there are hints at what's coming. There's even Tessa noticed a joke at the end of the Legends episode of the crossover where Ray says that Supergirl looks like his cousin. That just seems like a fun joke at the time, but maybe it's...
I mean, it's a reference to when he played Superman, back in the Bryan Singer movie, but it also, points towards the future where he's going to play Superman again in Crisis. So there's some really interesting little in-jokes here.
Yeah, so in December and January, we'll be able to see if any of these things are long gestating payoffs or if we're just reading too much into it.
Right. It's certainly going to be interesting, but almost immediately, it's clearly time to get the gang together, and Barry's the first thing Barry does is run and grab both Oliver and Diggles while they are just about to be killed by villain we never really talked about, Vigilante.
Well, one of the least interesting ones. I think he's more important in the next season of Arrow than he is in this season.
Well, and of course, their immediate response after Diggle, of course, throws up is that we almost had him. Sure you did, guys. Sure you did.
I love the joke with Diggle, like, especially because things are about to get really intense with Diggle and Barry later on in this very episode. It's kind of great to just see that gag every crossover where Barry saves Diggle and Diggle immediately throws up. And I love that he's just like, I'm good. Everything's fine. It's good. It's one of my favorite crossover moments.
So much fun. We have that going on. You just immediately grabs Barry and Felicity, and Thea Queen's just there, and she just goes, "Oh, even though I'm retired, this is aliens. This is great."
You don't turn down an opportunity to fight aliens. You just don't.
No. Why would you?
I don't know. I've seen that movie. Will Smith was great.
Oh, I was thinking like Alien.
No, you turn down that opportunity. You don't want to be in that
Even
spaceship.
if you don't want to
with
be as badass
No.
as Ripley. Her name's Ripley, right? It's I always get Ripley and Ridley confused, but Ridley Scott is the director. That's right.
That is a lot less fun way to fight aliens than this.
Wow. Yeah. They also immediately grab the Legends, conveniently leaving out two characters in this first episode because you don't have time for everyone, and also
this is CW money.
Yeah, exactly. And then Barry runs and goes to grab, or I guess he vibes into Earth 38 and grabs Supergirl.
And makes a real production, or Cisco makes a real production to Kara about how Barry is not his friend.
Yes. Cisco is definitely... this is everyone getting mad at Barry, like we talked about. And Cisco, I believe, has more to be angry at Barry, than Diggle does in this. But we'll discuss that in a second. The reason why these crossovers are so great is because immediately all these characters are interacting together, like a really, really great scene with Rory and Supergirl later on in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen crossovers before, but this is really the first time that it's a 3-episode crossover, right? Which we've only done 2, right, before. So we get this 3-episode crossover, and it's the first time that a lot of these characters have interacted with each other. I mean, Supergirl has not met anyone except for Barry at this point. The Legends, although they are collected from other shows, they haven't necessarily interacted with characters from shows that they haven't been on. So you get these really fun moments, just again, like them playing around in each other's world. I will say though, speaking of them leaving part of the Legends on the ship and leaving sort of the new Team Arrow in Star City for the first episode. I think they kind of learned their lesson from the last season, where they realized that they were having too many characters show up, and so I think they actually do a fairly good job of sort of leaving the characters like, okay, we're just going to use these characters for this episode. Okay, now we're doing the Arrow episode. Now we're going to use these characters, in Star City for this episode. I think they do a much better job of what I'm going to call character management. I feel like that should be a term we use a lot when it comes to these shows, especially as the cast grows. Character management is very important, and I think they sort of learned how to do it. What do you guys think? Did it seem too contrived, the way the characters were managed, or did it seem better than sort of having them all there in the same room?
I don't think it was very contrived at all. They very quickly introduced people to who they needed to be introduced to. They actually addressed that Iris does not know that Oliver Queen is the Green Arrow. Like I thought they did a really good job just introducing it, setting up the stakes, and also continuing a bit of information that that is relevant to just the Flash only plot points of this season.
Right, and remind me, I just rewatched this, but are the only two people who know at the beginning of the episode about Flashpoint Cisco and Felicity? No, Team Flash knows.
Team Flash knows, okay. But Felicity
is the only one outside of
the circle of trust.
Okay. That makes sense. Because I had forgotten that Oliver didn't know until this episode.
Right. And then when Diggle Oliver finds out and just kind of rolls with it immediately, which I really kind of love about Oliver. There's also a line early on where he's like, "What are you up to, Barry? Do you have another evil speedster for us to help you with?" Like it's Oliver doesn't get to be a source of humor in Arrow very, very often, so it's great when the writers for this can actually cast him in a slightly different light.
I also think Oliver really enjoys not being the person who fucked up this time. Like, usually it's Oliver. And so, I think he, not enjoys is probably the wrong word, but I think he just feels like, oh, well, I've made a lot of mistakes. People yell at me about this all the time. Like, now they're yelling at Barry. Like, this is...
But I didn't turn Diggle's daughter into a son, so...
Yeah. Okay, speaking of which, when Diggle finds out about Andy Jr. instead of Sarah Jr., he is very angry. And I almost wonder if he wanted to have a daughter instead.
I think that's... I always thought that. I mean, I thought it when I watched it the first time. I thought it when I saw it the second time. Because the way that line works, he says, "You took my daughter away from me." And it's not... Well, no, not... I mean, yes, but not really. What happened... You still have the same kid that you had before. It's just a different kid that you've always had because time travel. It's not like Cisco, who actually had someone taken away from him, but he feels that way still, and to me that implies that he wanted Sarah, he wanted the daughter.
Yeah, that was I don't I just always find that really funny that he was so upset at Barry about this when it's not like you had two kids and now you only have one. You still have only one kid, and it's just a different gender.
Well, and you never knew the difference either. He never knew Sarah because Sarah didn't exist. So it's almost like you took somebody away from me, but you... And Barry could have gone, well, Barry could have been a jerk and said, well, what did she look like?
Well, I think that this is all very true, but I also think there's a little bit of shock value to it as well. I think Diggle gets over it because at the end of the day, he won't know the difference. He doesn't know the difference between Sarah and John. But I think that in the moment, it felt like something had been taken away from him. And I think also a lot of the characters are reacting to the inherent selfishness of Barry with Flashpoint. I mean, Cisco brings it up quite a bit more than anyone else does. But, like, this idea that, like, oh, well, you just had to go back and, like, you know, take things away from us in order to be with, you know, your mom for 3 months or whatever. And so, like, I think a lot of it's just in the moment he was really hurt by this idea, but then he does get over it by the end of the crossover. He does say, you know, like, we're good. Like, you're the best guy that I know, basically. So.
Yeah. So they end up finding all this out right before they're about to start fighting. And they decide that they can't trust Barry. Plus, we also get a recording from Barry that the Legends found on a secret room in their ship from 40 years in the future. Which is
I never
interesting.
got the logic of this. I mean, maybe it'll be more clear in Crisis, but why is Barry... Because the recording's from Barry from the future, but why would that future Barry want to warn the Legends about that? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like the warning serves a purpose except for to out Barry as the originator of Flashpoint. Did anyone else see, like, a purpose of that message? Like, why is Barry so untrustworthy according to future Barry?
Yeah, I don't know.
This is an unanswered question. Like, I really don't know what the purpose of this recording is, except for to allow... it's really Firestorm, Jax, and Stein who find the message. The only purpose it seems to serve is one of a narrative purpose, to, like, let them in on it so they can, like, confront Barry and everyone finds out about Flashpoint then.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I'm really curious to see if it comes back up in Crisis, because otherwise it just seems like a throwaway plot point.
Right, but it also, because of, we know that the Flash disappears at a certain point in the future. How is Barry leaving a message?
Yeah, if it's from 2046, does he reappear in the future? Like, does this tell us that he disappears for, like, 20 years and then comes back?
No idea. This is one of the things that just doesn't make any sense, and it's probably better not thinking about it.
Yeah, they're not very... even at this point, and I think at the point that we're at in 2019, they're still not very good with time travel management. For every Back to the Future, for every note about time travel they get from Back to the Future, they then talk about quantum stuff, which is the antithesis of the Back to the Future closed loop time travel, and it just never works. If that bothers you, it's always bothered you. It will continue to bother you. Sometimes I think about the message from Barry, and I think about Bill and Ted trying to work through doing something in the future that will help them now, and then they say, well, we have to remember to do it or else it won't happen. But it did happen. And then they air guitar, and that's it. That's fine. That doesn't work as well here.
Right. So yeah, it seems to be just
although we do get a great training session with everybody rushing Kara and getting their asses handed to them by her.
Yeah, that was fun.
That kind of distracts from all the time shenanigans, I think.
Yeah, the only thing that was missing from that, and by the way, we haven't mentioned the fact that this whole this warehouse place that they're in the whole time is the old JSA building.
Oh,
A popular locale in DC cartoons and 80s children's playground sets. So that was fun, knowing that that's a character in here.
Well, and that'll be a plot point in Legends as well.
Yeah.
So that is interesting.
The only thing that's missing from the training is we didn't get to see Kara on the Salmon Ladder. For equal opportunity purpose, that would have been fun.
Maybe that'll happen during Crisis.
Yeah, we can hope.
One can only hope. But yeah, we get all these great interactions. I mean, like, because that's the strength of the crossovers, is when you get to see all these characters playing with each other. And so getting to see them all try to fight Kara, and her basically just, like, giving that winning smile and a shrug, like, oh yeah, I'm just way more powerful than all of you combined. That's just, it's fun. It's fun.
Right, and then you have, like,
except for
Mick,
Oliver.
Or Rory telling Supergirl, he's like, I can't call you Supergirl, it's just dumb. She's like, well, what about Kara? No, that's dumb too. I'm just going to call you Skirt. And And then in pretty much the same scene, when Mick needs help, he does scream Supergirl.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's great. It's just great. Like when they get to play with these things, when these characters get to just they all have different sets of values. All these shows are very different from each other, and they just really lean into it in their interactions, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, really the weakest part of at least the first episode of Invasion is, well, everything involving the Dominators and the President. That's just, it's really...
Is it bad
lame.
that I didn't even realize that the President died in that episode?
Yeah.
Until they mention it later?
Well...
Like, apparently the Dominators kill the President of the United States. They abduct him, and then they kill him. Mm-hmm. But it's such an unimportant part of the episode that it just sort of, like, flies by. Anyway.
Hold on, guys. So in the interest of time, why don't we just make this episode all about Invasion?
Okay.
I think that'd be a good idea, because there's so much to unpack here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you could talk a lot about Invasion. I think the crossovers are really where a lot of the work for Crisis gets done. It's not the only work for Crisis.
At this point.
But at this point, they clearly knew where they were starting to go.
Yeah. And plus, we'll talk about it in a second, but let's continue on the Flash episode of Crisis.
Okay.
The recording, though, is kind of an excuse to not have Oliver and Barry at this warehouse when they fight.
Yeah, because the whole conceit of the episode is, so Oliver protests to everyone who is not trusting Barry, and so he elects to stay behind with Barry at the warehouse while Supergirl, the legends who are there, which I think at this point consist of Sarah, Mick, Ray, and Firestorm. Is that everybody who's there from Legends? And then Thea and Diggle are the ones from Arrow.
Where are Felicity and Cisco?
They're back at the warehouse. Okay. They're doing the thing that they usually
do. They're doing tech support.
Tech support,
as they call themselves.
Yeah. And so they all go off to rescue the president. And in doing so, they end up getting mind controlled by the Dominators, because the Dominators apparently can do everything, including mind control. And so they get stuck in this mind control. And so the Dominators are using them to basically wreak havoc on Central City. And so it's up to Oliver and Barry to rescue the team from this mind control. Which is, again, kind of fun, because we got to see Oliver be the one who suggests that they have to train against Supergirl in the beginning of the episode. And so now we actually get to see Barry and Oliver fight, all of these people. And of course, most of the time they're just dodging Supergirl, because you can't really fight her unless you have similar powers.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with Superman, is typically the villains that Superman has to fight have to be able to hurt Superman in some way.
Right, although we do get to see Barry and Kara go head to head, and it mainly involves Barry just sort of like leading Kara back to I guess they have a device that they're using to control everyone's minds, and so he like leads her back to that device and like causes her to destroy it, which frees everyone. But it is interesting to see that even Barry doesn't think that he can really go against her. All he can really do is outrun her and sort of outsmart her, or the mind-controlled version of her.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, this is just another fun moment. We get to see Supergirl being kind of awesome. We get to see everyone kind of fighting. It's fun. It's just fun.
Yeah, I mean, and then we get to see, Barry and Oliver are their bromance continues. Oliver has Barry's back. He doesn't hate him after the Flashpoint thing. So, we get to see more of them together, which, Sam pointed out, it starts to become something that's really important in the crossovers, this relationship between Barry and Oliver.
Yeah, if you notice, if you exclude the little tease in Supergirl, which is a repetition of the scene where Cisco and Barry come in, breach into her apartment, and take her away. If you think about the beginning of the crossover as the Flash episode, the very first thing is a flash forward to the latter part of the episode where Oliver is telling Barry, oh, they've done it again this time. And the last part of the crossover, the Legends episode, on a Legends of Tomorrow episode, the episode ends with Barry and Oliver sitting at the bar talking. And so one of the things that I think that this crossover as a whole does is tells you the Arrowverse is about the two of them, bottom line. And, it really brought into clarity for me that the Supergirl show with aliens and Legends with time travel and all the characters in there really build out the universe. But at the end of the day, the Arrowverse is appropriately enough about the Arrow, but it's also about his best friend, Barry. And so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But you really start to see that in this crossover more than any place before that, I think.
Yeah, and I could see an entire episode of just them hanging out because they're just so much fun to watch.
I'm actually kind of hoping, as we get farther and farther along and we actually talk about this current season of Arrow as well as the previous season of Arrow, talk more about how my hopes that for what this new season might be, I really hope we get some of that. If not a whole episode, we get more of that before the end.
We also don't have to worry about any new episodes of Legends until after crossover or after Crisis.
True. That's true. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too, I mean, we talked about this before with the crossovers, is that this feels like an episode of The Flash. Like this first episode feels like the episode of The Flash. The other person who helps Oliver and Barry is Wally West, who has just gotten his powers in The Flash and who's being discouraged from using them by Iris and by Joe. And he, in a very, very contrived way here. I really didn't like this storyline because it just makes Iris, again, it makes Iris seem like she's not, I don't know. I really think that Iris as a character, there's a lot of disservice done to her. I think she could have been a much better character than she is. But she just ends up being this sort of person that gets to tell people what they can't do. And so she has this moment with Wally where she's basically lying to him about the extent of his powers at the beginning of the episode. But we do get to see, even though he realizes that they're lying to him, even though he realizes all this stuff, we get to see him in action. He goes and he saves Barry, even though he gets knocked out, I think, by Supergirl.
Yeah, but it effectively puts an end to the can Wally be a superhero, and so it moves the narrative of the Flash along in a similar way that the Arrow episode moves Thea's story along.
Yeah, and so I think that's one of the strengths of this, is that even though it's like a massive crossover, like 3 episodes, each episode still feels like the show that it belongs to. So I think this first episode definitely feels like The Flash, and it does, like you said, it brings these characters to the forefront. Characters that we don't see Wally for the rest. We don't see Wally or Iris or Joe for the rest of the crossover, but it does something for those characters, even though they're not part of the main story.
I would argue that the Legends episode doesn't do the same thing.
The Legends is a little bit more. I think the Legends is a little bit more iffy.
But that's also an issue with what is the Legends in the second season, which we will talk about much later.
Yeah. And one thing to really discuss, speaking of just continuing storylines and everything, at the end of this episode, who all is captured here? It's Oliver.
Oh, right. They're beamed up.
Yeah.
Oliver, Thea, Sarah
and Ray.
And Ray.
It's just those 4. No, Diggle. Diggle is part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because like other characters show up in the next episode when they're captured, so it kind of is a little confusing sometimes to remember who's captured and who isn't.
Right. But pretty much they get captured, and we are treated to a very special episode of Arrow, which is also
Elseworlds. But
not
that
yet.
Well, there's infinite Elseworlds.
But it's basically it's a Wonderful Life version of Arrow, which is appropriate because this is also the 100th episode of Arrow.
Well, and like these usually come out in December, so it's like kind of Christmassy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, this is after Thanksgiving. It kind of falls in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's a Wonderful Life. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, there's a little bit of that going on in there.
Right. And so Oliver's just kind of treated to this life where he never got on the boat, he never became the Green Arrow, and what that would have looked like.
Right, and it's kind of a mass hallucination. Is that what they call it?
Yes,
a shared
because they're all.
hallucination?
It's not just Oliver's.
Elseworlds.
Yeah, it's all of theirs, and for some reason that involves Diggle being the Arrow. He would have liked that.
Well,
Diggle is
it's a
like
simulated
the Arrow.
world.
Right.
Right. So Diggle is the Arrow. Felicity, who was not captured, still is in this, but she's Ray Palmer's fiance. And Ray Palmer is just, I guess, a billionaire, like he was at the beginning. He's the CEO of Palmer Tech. Sarah is just a regular college kid doing college things. I don't know. Like Sarah, it does not have a lot of storyline in this episode. And Laurel is there, right? Because if he had never got on the boat, he would have stayed with her. He would have become a better person. And so the whole...
Which doesn't logically make sense because he was cheating on Laurel with Sarah before the boat. Yeah. Or else they would have never gotten on the boat together.
It's a little confusing. But I mean, at this point, Laurel is dead. Or Earth 1 Laurel is dead. And so... it's supposed to be kind of an emotional tie-in, and to see her and her and Oliver getting married, right, in this thing, and Thea is on good terms with her father. Is that all Thea really gets?
Both parents are around.
Yeah, both parents are there.
Oliver doesn't want to run the family company, so he refers to the guy from the first season who's with Oliver's mom. Yeah.
Walter. You all forgot about Walter, didn't you?
But Oliver hasn't, because he asks, wouldn't he be a good person? And Oliver's dad's like, no.
But yeah, we get to see Moira Queen. She's not dead in this version.
Tommy is in Chicago
doing
Tommy stuff.
He's a doctor.
Oh, right. Sure.
He's a doctor.
Maybe he's a county general with like George Clooney and everybody in this one.
We get to see Deathstroke, but it's not Manu Bennett Deathstroke, so he doesn't talk.
No. It's now for the dancing Deathstroke. Hooray. Because that guy got that guy's movement does not match Manu Bennett at all.
No.
It was not good.
Yeah, so I mean basically the way they get out of it is that they all start to remember flashbacks into their previous lives. They all start to realize that there's something wrong, and they are trying to think their way out of it.
Everyone wants out, with one exception.
Yeah, Thea is the notable exception. Thea wants to stay, which this is a moment where I'm just like, this is not what somebody would say in real life. This is a moment of unbelievability for me, because I get why she would want to stay, but I don't get why anyone didn't say, well, what if they don't leave you here? What if they end up like taking you out of this and like vivisecting you or probing you or whatever? It just didn't seem like a very strong argument for her to want to stay when she would be uncertain of what would happen.
Right. And this is the Arrow's way of addressing the too many characters problems. We'll just make it to where Thea has a great realization that she does not want to be on the team anymore, and then we can get rid of her, because it's Willa Holland we should have gotten rid of.
Right. And we'll go ahead and just bring back Malcolm Merlyn and Damien Dark, because why not? We have them here in Vancouver anyway.
Right. Well, and also...
They're on those super cool contracts.
Well, we also get to see, like, there's a lot in the Legends season, which we're going to talk about in another show. There's a lot with Sarah and Dark, sort of facing off because Dark killed her sister. So I think there's a little of that, too. This idea of, like, confronting, like, someone you fear. Although it's great to know that Oliver fears Deathstroke more than his current villain, Prometheus. Was it Prometheus?
Well, but that's what we talked about. We talked about that last time, didn't we? That Deathstroke is the villain that really outshines the current season of Arrow's villain.
Well, and I think they knew that too, because again, it would have been really easy to just have Prometheus be the person that he has to face, to get out of the hallucination. But no, they have to have Deathstroke, although again, like you said, not played by Manu Bennett. So I think that is really telling here, is that everyone has like this emotional connection, because Thea has to fight Malcolm Merlin, her father, but we get Deathstroke for Oliver.
And something else that Oliver gets in this episode is that he has both of his parents that, who he loves and who he's with and all this, but he also gets approval from another parental figure.
All right.
Detective Lance is ready to accept him and told him, when I first met you, you were a screw-up, but I really like the man you've become. So, the aliens were doing a real good job of mining things that would want to keep them in this state.
But also we get, so the other part of the storyline that we get this episode is outside of the dream state, outside of the alien hallucination, which is we get Felicity and Cisco really are leading this particular charge, they're trying to figure out how to free Oliver, trying to figure out how to find the team and how to free them. And so we get new Team Arrow on the case. We get to see Renee in the crossover, and Ragman, who I honestly forgot had made it this far in the season. And
did you know that Renee hates metas?
Yeah, there's a lot of really weird, vitriol, between Renee towards metas, and then we get it from we'll talk about it in the next episode with Oliver and Supergirl, but, there's this, really weird, oh, by the way, I'm, super racist against metas.
Well, but Renee says the same thing about metas that Oliver says about Kara, is that you showed up, and when you showed up, all the bad metas showed up too. So
you must not be trustworthy. So he refuses to Renee refuses to work initially with the Flash and with Supergirl, but they save his life, so everything's fine, I guess.
Sure.
Which just goes to show that when somebody is racist or speciesist, is it really speciesist at this point?
No, it's just racist.
Is it racist? So when somebody's racist, really what saves them from being racist is you being a good person.
You have to personally intervene in their lives in a life or death moment, and then we're all good.
And then they're fine.
Sure.
But whatever.
Ah, man. And we also do have just another thing to pile onto that Prometheus is I think Prometheus really is a weaker version of Deathstroke, right? Because Prometheus wanted to pick apart Oliver's life brick by brick, but Deathstroke did that much better.
Yeah, and there's this always Prometheus or Adrian Chase keeps having to say things like, I'm always 10 steps ahead of you, Oliver. But Deathstroke he didn't even have to say it. He just always was, that far ahead. And so, it just kind of seems like Prometheus. I think that's a good point. Prometheus is kind of a Deathstroke ripoff.
But just trying to think of anything else. The effects of this episode, I believe, are actually felt more in the next episode, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, the next episode really does most of the heavy lifting for the crossover, and I think that might have been a purposeful decision, because as we talked about a few minutes ago, the Legends don't really do a lot of story building for the sake of the Legends in that episode, so we can really just jettison the Arrow and the Flash narrative cargo that we had and get straight into what the Dominators are and what they do and what it means.
But we do get to see them escape the spaceship somehow without knowing anything about alien technology.
Yes, 2 spaceships in one day.
Yeah, and they get picked up by the Wave Rider. So that's sort of our introduction to the Legends portion of the crossover.
Right. And they also, in reality, the only thing about the Legends that really gets to be done or, that's effective throughout the rest of Legends is Dr. Stein finding out he has a daughter due to his own time-traveling shenanigans.
Yeah, Barry didn't even mess that one up. It's nice.
There's a couple of interesting parallels here, and we'll talk about what happens with Cisco in the last episode here in a minute, but it is interesting that Stein gets sort of juxtaposed against Barry here, because he, in an earlier episode of this season of The Legends, meets his younger self and gives him a bit of advice, which apparently was very successful in the bedroom and led to the conception of a daughter that he did not previously have. So when he comes back for this... So when he comes back to this episode, to Central City in the present, he is met with a fully grown daughter that he has very few memories of. He does have a few. He gets a couple of like flashes of memory.
Yeah, and it's not a daughter like a young girl or even a teenager. She's a full-grown adult with a doctorate in what, nanotechnology? Is that correct?
Yeah. Did my 6 years at MIT mean nothing to you?
Well, no, because I didn't know you existed.
There's like this really weird moment where he's trying to pretend like he knows everything about her life, and he clearly doesn't. And I mean, like, Stein is supposed to be kind of a jerk. Like, I think we forget that as we kind of go further into his character, as we sort of warm up to him as a character. But we do get these, like, grating moments still where he just completely underestimates his daughter, because why would she have an advanced degree in science? It's only what her father does. But, like, no, she must, like, just be a completely worthless person. So it's interesting. He even says that she's not a real person for a while, which was a little disturbing.
Yeah, and he does say, I love this because this is such an appropriate line for the character, but he does say that he sired a daughter.
Yeah, of course he said that.
But he and Caitlin get to like work this out basically, and this is all Caitlin's given to do this crossover, which is a little unfortunate. We've talked before about my problems with Caitlin this season, but she's given the role here of just guiding Stein through his journey of discovering that he actually loves his daughter that he didn't previously have, which is unfortunate, I think. But I think the one thing it does do is sort of highlight that Stein and Caitlin do have this connection because of Ronnie. Like, it turns out the only good thing that this character Ronnie did was create this sort of relationship between Stein and Caitlin, where he can always go to Caitlin and tell her things and ask her for her advice.
And I guess we really should start the Legends of Tomorrow episode, where
all the shit happens.
Yeah. This is such a fun episode. So they do mention right away what Oliver tells Kara, thanks for bringing Thea home.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
she's not going to be in this episode.
It turns out her enthusiasm to fight aliens only lasted until she was kidnapped to a spaceship, and then she's like, "Nah, I'm good.
If you're not going to put me back in the altered reality where I'm happy, just take me home."
But we get the rest of the legends in return. We get Nate and
Hooray.
Umaya, who, again, we haven't really introduced yet. We'll talk about her later. She's a new Legends edition. I guess Nate is also a new Legends edition this season. They were the only two, right, that they left out?
Yes.
Yeah, Steel and Vixen.
Right. And so they get brought in, and it turns out the Dominators have a weapon that they're going to use to do something terrible.
It's a mysterious weapon.
Spoiler alert. It's a weapon that they created because metahumans are endangering their lives.
Not just metahumans. Even aliens are mad at Barry for Flashpoint.
Oh, it's all because of Flashpoint.
It turns out that Barry made even these terrible-looking aliens mad at him this season. Like, really everyone's mad at Barry.
And so, the question that I posed, or a version of the question that I posed when we talked about Flashpoint earlier, is this storyline better than the source material from which they adapted Flashpoint? Because basically we sacrificed the comic version of storyline, the comic version of the Flashpoint storyline to get this invasion. Because that was all set up for everybody being mad at Barry and to give us invasion. Was it worth it?
Probably not.
No.
I mean, again, Invasion's very fun, but I would have traded it for like an actual Flashpoint storyline.
I mean, you can actually argue that this, combined with how Legend Season 2 ends, is an argument in favor of, it's the Batman thing. Was Gotham City as terrible as it was after Batman started doing it? Did the villains start reacting to Batman? Did they amp up in relationship to him? Did he actively make the city worse in that way? So the question here is, if Barry hadn't become a meta and started messing with things, would aliens have descended upon them? Would, once they started messing with other Earths and other, did they bring about this alien invasion? Did they bring about breaking time? Did they bring about crisis just by existing, just by trying to be good and screwing up in every way imaginable? Did they bring all this on themselves? That's what the Dominators argue about this invasion, but we can also ask that question about breakages of time that will occur and about crisis.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Batman, like Christopher Nolan's version of Batman at the end of Batman Begins has Gordon saying, like, well, what about escalation, right? Like this idea that because you're dressed up, other people are going to dress up. And I think that's something that's kind of borne out across these shows.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver does kind of drive the point right home when he talks to Kara. He's like, look, when I started out, I was dealing with humans. I could deal with that. Then it was metas. I could deal with that. But now we have so much sci-fi stuff. I can't deal with you. And plus, you're a woman who's stronger than me, and I hate you, so leave.
Yeah,
racist.
I heard in that, I paused it when we were watching it, and I said, let me get this straight. Basically, what he's saying is, I'm racist. I would like to, I hope that I will not be racist in the future. But in order to not be racist, I need to be racist right now, so we can, not be together, so I can think about being not racist, and maybe in the future, I can not be racist with you. But in conclusion, right now, racist.
In this essay, I will. Well, I mean, but doesn't this reflect, and again, I haven't read a lot of these comics, but doesn't this reflect Green Arrow's hatred of Superman in the comics? Because Green Arrow hates Superman, right? Like, that's the storyline that happens.
I mean, that's a Dark Knight thing, but...
Oh, is it
Maybe
Batman?
that's what it is.
Well, isn't Green Arrow... Well, the one thing about Superman and Green Arrow is Superman is at points nominally in charge of the Justice League, and Green Arrow is constantly being shunned. So I guess that's not nothing.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I wonder if this was them trying to reflect that aspect of this character, like this idea that he inherently distrusts Superman. But the way that they do it here definitely comes across as just very unexpected racism. Like this idea, you're an alien, they're aliens. I can't handle all these aliens. You all need to calm down.
Yeah, you kids today are changing society too fast.
Ooh.
Get off my lawn.
Some Pelosi.
Yeah.
There.
Well, I was thinking Clint Eastwood, but sure.
Okay.
Also, the Green Arrow does kind of... I think he gets more annoyed with, Superman being the, always lawful good kind of person.
Yeah, I think there's also a distrust of power, right?
Right, because he's been presented with this person who is super, and Barry didn't pull him. Well, Barry doesn't even really know. But so nobody's pulled them inside and said, well, kryptonite, it's this thing. And she does have a weak spot. That never gets established. So, yeah, I mean, she kind of reads as godlike without any weak spots, and that's...
Yeah, I think there's something about Oliver that really distrusts power. Maybe it's because he doesn't think he can defeat it.
You mean Mayor Oliver Queen? Most powerful person in the city of which he is mayor?
Yeah, and Oliver definitely has some fascistic tendencies.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun during the next crossover. Actual fascists.
And the tension, the tension between Supergirl and Oliver will also be much funnier during the next crossover.
They do a good job of building some of these things and then paying them off. It's just, oh boy, will they be able to pay off the big stuff?
Yeah. Well, so we do, because it is a Legends episode, we do get time travel, right? It turns out the Dominators have been to Earth before, in 1950s.
And Felicity and Cisco begged to get to go on the trip, and so we get the fun Felicity talking Leap Morph.
Also, let's talk about the line from Joe in the Flash episode where he immediately knows 1951. Like that he's a secret ufologist.
Yeah, they did a good job of planting that in the Flash episode.
I just thought that was really an amusing part. But yeah, they time travel and do time travel things.
Yeah, and this is, of course, supposed to parallel, like, it's supposed to help us resolve this Cisco storyline with Barry. So Cisco's been mad at Barry for a while about Flashpoint, especially when he finds out that Barry's Flashpoint excursion actively killed his brother. Like, in the other timeline, his brother is still alive. So he's very angry at Barry, but because of this, and he is very aggressive about it. Like, we're not friends. He doesn't want to be around Barry, and so that's part of why he goes on this time travel excursion. But then he actually ends up messing up in time.
This is called losing the high ground.
Yeah. So he actively does something while in the past that affects the future in a negative way.
He saves the Dominator.
So this Dominator, they get captured. So Umaya, Nate, and Mick, because those are the three that get captured by a secret government organization, and along with a Dominator. And they're torturing the Dominator, trying to, as secret government organizations do. And Cisco and Felicity free the team, but then they also end up freeing the Dominator and having a discussion with them, by which the Dominator ends up knowing a lot more about Earth than they would have otherwise known.
By the way, this is one of the best episodes of the X-Files. This is a great, conspiracy mythology episode. It was a lot of fun. I don't know where Mulder and Scully were, but it was a great ep.
Secret crossover.
Oh, man. I just wanted them to start talking about Paperclip and just all the other stuff that Tessa hasn't seen, because Tessa hasn't seen the X-Files.
I haven't. I'll do it this afternoon.
Well, you've seen one episode. It was great.
Anyway, so I mean, it's great because we do get this sort of like closure on the Cisco thing, because he's like, oh, like I've been mad at Barry this whole time, but it turns out if you do any time travel at all, it's really easy to do this. And then they're friends. Yeah, and then they're friends again.
Right. It's a good way to wrap that up, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also it underscores the thing about time travel, that time travel is just, it's complicated. And as much as this show does mess up time travel, I think it does a fairly good job of underscoring the idea that if time travel were possible, it would be almost impossible to do it right, to not make mistakes. So I think that worked really well this episode.
But again, emotional heavy lifting of the Flash is done in another show, which I think, I keep saying it, I think this really highlights the Barry and Oliver as the center of the Arrowverse.
That's true.
They are the sun and the moon, really.
Right. Yeah, so essentially they find out that the aliens are there for Barry because metahumans screwed them up. And
they have a metahuman bomb.
Right. A metahuman bomb that would
metahumans.
kill 2 million non-metahumans.
Close enough.
These things happen.
Yeah.
Unless Barry Allen surrenders himself.
Which he was willing to do. Foreshadowing what will eventually happen at the end of the Flash season anyway, so I guess that's more work done there.
Yeah, but the team stops him, because finally, in this last episode, we get a united team. Everybody is ready to back Barry Allen and to save him. They've all forgiven him for Flashpoint.
Yeah, and Oliver and Oliver shares a look with Kara, which is your way of knowing it's okay.
A little chin lift in the middle of a fight. But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of that going on. We get Sarah and Cisco team up, which is fun. At the end of the episode, they're on destroying the bomb while everyone fights the Dominators down below. I don't know. Like, these are two characters I never would have, like, thought these two characters should interact. But it's, like, really fun to see them, like, shouting at each other and not understanding really what
Right.
the other one's trying to say.
Right. And it,
Right. So
like, it's a lot of fun seeing Rory interact with Kara, especially at the end of the episode when he, like, asks Sarah to confirm that she's hot.
Oh, no, he asked Sarah to confirm if the president is
Oh,
hot.
okay.
The new president, which is a woman.
and she confirms.
And she does confirm.
Katie Lotz is the most valuable player in the Arrowverse. I am convinced. You cannot prove me wrong. She may not be my favorite, although she's definitely in the top 3 favorite
she's
characters.
my favorite.
But she is the most valuable utility player. She will do anything and carry it off.
So
Any interaction with any character.
Well, yeah, and I think... Oh, go ahead.
I actually have a theory here that it's Rory meeting Kara that becomes his motivation to become a writer and write about strong female characters.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yes.
Well, especially because we didn't talk about it, but his very first interaction with her in the very first episode, right? Kara's the last team member to arrive, and Barry's introducing her, and I don't remember if it's Mick or if it's someone else says, like, well, what makes her so super? And she, like, flies and then does the thing with the laser. You know, she lasers the S into the ground with her.
She makes the House of L.
Yeah. And then Mick is like, well, I'm convinced. And like just immediately just like, yeah, this
works
this
for
works.
me.
This is good.
Not gonna call you Supergirl because that's dumb, but I acknowledge your strength. Yeah.
So there's a really great through line here with Mick and Supergirl where he clearly also finds her attractive. He tells her to call him at the end of the last episode. But Sarah is so interesting because Sarah and Mick especially, I was telling Sam, like, again, these are not two characters that I would have thought would develop together as much as they have. In fact, when Legends started, Mick was my least favorite character of the ones on the ship. But really, their friendship is the center of Legends. So even if you say this episode isn't like a Legends episode, I mean, it does focus a lot on Barry and Oliver. There is still that like central, like Sarah and Mick, even though they completely do not understand each other most of the time, like they have each other's backs, right? Like she's gonna, if he asks her if the president of the United States is hot, she's gonna tell him what she thinks. So like it's kind of some good character work that they're doing here.
Yeah. I oh man, there's just so much little things, but essentially it just ends in a battle royale with all the superheroes fighting all of the aliens, and then the heroes planning little devices that cause immense pain to the Dominators, and that's about it.
Yeah, the Dominators never come back ever.
No,
it's fine.
No,
they were like, nope.
And the man in black gets put in his place
by Kara.
Yeah, that was great.
Which is really great. Where she's like, I talked to your new president, and you don't have a job anymore.
Yeah,
so there's
have a good time.
Well, and I think that it's really useful because Kara does work for a secret government organization in Supergirl. So it's nice to see that, like, there's some accountability here. Like, Kara represents, like, no, like, if you're going to have a secret government organization, they need to do things right. You're not doing it right. So.
Yes. And you know what? Good for this episode putting up the idea that credible experts in their field should be able to make decisions related to their field. That's a real life lesson that this episode teaches you. Good things happen.
But yeah, I mean, and then of course Martin Stein ends up deciding to keep his daughter instead of
hasn't. Yeah.
No, he was gonna go back because remember he said she's not a real person. He was gonna go back and erase her, but then he becomes convinced that he has this connection with his daughter. He loves her, so he's not gonna go back.
Right,
and fix it.
Because going back and fixing it would be exactly what Barry did with Flashpoint, and we saw how that worked. But sure, because he loves her. That's a good plan.
But yeah, I mean, I only mention it because it's going to become a plot point later in Legends.
And then Cisco gives Kara a fancy present that's actually a way to breach into their world if she ever needs to call.
Yeah, so that it makes the whole on separate Earths things kind of moot. Because because they can just basically communicate and cross over whenever they want.
Because who says the line? Who says the line?
So there is actually, weirdly, a foreshadowing of Crisis. I think it is in the last episode.
It's right at that point.
It's right at the end, because Oliver, like, actually apologizes to Kara.
Oh.
You know,
That's
for being
nice.
racist. And he says, like, somebody, I don't remember how it gets brought up, but she, like, says something about, well, you two are, like, the heroes of this Earth, and you take care of it. And Oliver says, well, that's funny, because I was just thinking that this Earth needs a Supergirl. And
they're gonna get one.
Because in Crisis, we're collapsing all the Earths. The multiverse is not going to be anymore. So you do get this, like, sense that, I mean, I don't know if that's what they were thinking when they wrote the line, but there is this sense that Crisis is going to happen. Like, there's all these, like, little hints that...
And right after that, I was thinking, and this episode made me have a theory about how Crisis starts. What if the first tangible part of Crisis, and I don't remember how the episodes run in this order, but it doesn't necessarily matter. What if the crisis that Crisis on Infinite Earths is named after begins proper on Kara's Earth? What if she actually does need to call them for once? Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be interesting, because nothing says it has to start on Earth 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to end on Earth 1, so
Right.
Why do we need to be so, like, you know, why do we have to have ownership over the whole thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, this is skipping ahead, but to a future crossover, but, like, we do find out later that, like, there's another Earth that's been destroyed already in the interest of Crisis, in the Elseworlds crossover. So it would be interesting if, like, the beginning of crossover is maybe not the destruction of Earth 38. It's Earth 38 that she's on, yeah. But maybe, like, the threat comes to Earth 38 first. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah. But also, just one of my favorite moments of this entire episode, though, is at the very end when Oliver and Barry both acknowledge that if they never had their superpowers, their lives would be fine, but they wouldn't be full.
They wouldn't be together.
They wouldn't be best friends.
And I just think that that's a lot of emotional work in such a short amount of time. It's just acknowledging that, like, yeah, it's not like we would we'd be unhappy. We just wouldn't be fully content.
And that's why, you know, in later seasons, I kept hoping that Crisis would take longer, or not Crisis, but like the crossovers would take longer and longer, because I know it's a massive undertaking for them, and budgets being what they are, but it's like the good stuff comes out in these episodes. The good work of the Arrowverse at large. And this is a really good example of that at the very end here.
Even if Barry can't get drunk, so why did they go to a bar?
Yeah, that seems dumb, but whatever.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes you just want two guys wearing leather together
In a bar.
right, in a bar.
Well, one of them gets drunk.
Right.
Yeah.
And just Grant Gustin and Steve Amell just have so much chemistry. It's just so much fun to watch.
It is.
Yet another person that Grant Gustin has chemistry with besides Iris.
Hey, oh, wow. He has more chemistry with Oliver than Iris.
Oh,
Wow.
Don't you think?
also,
Wow. No, he does.
the first episode when Iris finds out that Oliver Queen is the Arrow, she does remark that he just got hotter, and then in the Elseworlds crossover 2 years later, she insists that Barry is not her type.
Yep, that's true. That is true. Iris definitely has a thing for Stephen Amell, Oliver Queen.
Maybe like Wentworth Miller and Dominic Purcell, there will be a project a few years down the road that will reunite Stephen Amell and Grant Gustin.
That'd be pretty nice.
It would
Yeah.
be nice.
A
wouldn't it?
musical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and to go super meta CW with you, who knows? Maybe Jensen Ackles will be on Walker, Texas Ranger with Jared Padalecki, because in case you haven't heard, that's a thing.
Oh, we talked about it on the main episodes of Geek 101.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's the other crossover I want. I want Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles to be in
On-
the Arrowverse. I don't even care. Like,
Oh, I thought you were going to say Gilmore Girls.
Oh,
We've had that discussion a lot.
no, I mean, like, because you get all these pictures, because like they're all on the CW, and so you get all these like pictures on Instagram of them like palling around and playing jokes on each other. So they clearly are friends in real life. But it would be, just think it'd be great if they just had a short cameo.
Yeah.
For no reason. I don't even care. Like, what they do.
We also mentioned in that same episode that what we really want to have happen is just to reboot Supernatural immediately without the Winchesters.
Okay.
You'd lose all the fangirls. All of them.
Well, what if we did again? What if we went meta CW and it was rebooting Supernatural, but instead of two brothers, it was two sisters played by Blake Lively and Leighton Meester.
Ooh.
There's a show.
There you go. I'd watch that.
All right, I think that pretty much does it for this episode, right, guys? We've talked
Yeah.
over
we
an
can,
hour
we can do
about.
we can do the headcanon all day. So
Yeah.
yes, it's fine.
We should definitely. You've been having us rank seasons of Arrow, well, seasons of all the shows. But I wanted to ask you, how would you rank the crossovers? Like, how does this compare to the other two that we've talked about?
Right now, this is the best one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Is it better than the Music Meister episode though?
Yes.
Which is not okay.
What do you guys think?
Well, I definitely think Invasion is clearly the best of the three
So
that
far.
we've talked about so far. Then Arrow versus Flash,
Mhm.
the Versus crossover, the first one, and then the Legends one, the Legends backdoor pilot. Right?
Yeah.
Does that
Yes.
make sense as an
Yes.
order?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely the best. I remember watching this and thinking, this is amazing. I will never stop watching these shows.
Funny how things turn out.
All right, guys. I think that about does it for today. Can you go ahead and plug your pluggables?
You can find me on Twitter at Suela Tessa.
And I'm on Twitter at Sam_Morris9.
You can find me on Twitter at Hebrews Pale Ale. You can find the podcast at geek101podcast.com or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. That's all for today. Class dismissed.